To turn with me, please, this evening to Psalm 91. This psalm has been passed down through the generations. It's a psalm that keeps you going through all the trials and tribulations that go through our lives from my great-grandfather. I don't know if it's great-great-grandfather, but through the wars that they had to go through all the struggles in life that they had to go through. This was their psalm that they would all turn to, and that would carry them and the people surrounding them to bring them closer to Christ, to bring them to Christ. If we just start in Psalm 91 and verse 1. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God. In Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only that with thine eyes shalt thou behold, and see the reward of the wicked. Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For He shall give His angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and the adder, the young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample under feet. Because He hath set His love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. Let's just go to the Lord in prayer. God, we thank you this day for giving us the time and the safety to gather here together to praise thy name, to worship thy name, and to learn more about you and your wondrous works that you have wrought among us and are still working in our hearts to this day. And we pray that you would anoint me with your Spirit, that you would give me the words to speak, not the ones I want to speak, but the ones that you want me to speak, the ones that you want the congregation to hear today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So this psalm, if we just start back at verse 1, He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Now here up in the north where we don't get much sun, that doesn't play as much significance as it does in many other places. We only had, I think, one day this year that was over plus 35. But even then we get to see how good a shadow is in a time of scorching sun. And in many places in the desert where it gets that hot on an almost daily basis, shadows are a thing that everybody seeks. One of the most important things of the oasis is water, and the next is shadows. There's always trees planted, and trees that have long branches so you can sit under their shadows and rest from the sun. And when we dwell with God in our secret place, when we find that secret place with God that we can commune with Him daily, we will dwell in His shadow of safety. We will dwell when there's heat going on around us, when there's things happening all around us. We can run into His shadow as a little nesting bird that just hatches out of the egg. Their first instinct when they see danger is to run under that mother, to run under the shadow of safety. And I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him will I trust. God is not only a refuge, a place that we can hide, but He is a fortress, a place that when we hide and are discovered can still defend us. A place of refuge could be a home, it could be just some place in the forest that nobody can find you. But when you have a fortress, even if the trouble does find you, you have the defenses there. A fortress always has things to attack the evil with and things to prevent the evil to come to you. And surely he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. Not all things that come against us are visible far, far away. Many things of war are things to catch by surprise, and that is just how the devil likes to work. Not all of his attacks can you see. You can see some of them, yes, and a lot of them are just distractions to keep you walking in the path to be caught in those snares. The snares are just a little rope or just a little metal piece that are hidden, well hidden, all the scent is erased, and that you just, if you happen to walk upon it, there you go. It could be a pit you fall into, it could be a rope that brings you right up to a tree that's been already positioned for you to walk into. And he shall cover thee with his feathers, under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Now a shield, we all know what that is. It is something that soldiers used to wear in battle that would protect them from the attacks of the enemy. And a buckler is just a smaller version of that, but it would be much thicker to ward off powerful blows. If you have what they had back then, most people could only afford a leather shield. And that would be good for, let's say, a sword slash, but it would not be good for an axe or a mace, because those are so heavy they would just cut right through it if they were swung fast enough. And a buckler, it was usually a smaller metal plate shield that would have a really big, wide bulb in the middle. And that you could use to bounce off the blows of the enemy. Just like the tanks, they have their armor sloped to bounce off an attack. And when you bounce off an attack, you minimize the blow. When something is coming at you at a force and it hits something directly, all the force goes right into it. But if it is a round object, it'll bounce off and only a percentage of that force will be hit. So even if Satan does attack us with full force, if we have the truth of God as our shield and our buckler, we can either ward it off completely or at least glance it off so that the effect will be minimal to us. And that is just how God intends for us to use the Bible. Many people at work, they fire off these remarks against the Bible, against Christianity. And when you are in the Bible, when you are studying the Bible, you know exactly which words God puts on your heart to ward off those attacks or to bounce them off and almost negate them. And thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day. Now, terror in the night. I know for me it was something that would always possess me in my childhood, that there could be something lurking around the corner in the darkness. And that is one thing that people fear, is the fear of the unknown. When you don't know about something, when you're going into it, you don't know what to expect. You don't know how to set up a defense against it. You don't know what you're coming up against, and you can't prepare for it. And that is one thing that people, I know, especially myself, we don't like it. Because if you know something is there, you know exactly how to set up to defend against it. Even if you can't defend against it, you know how to run away from it, how fast you need to be running to get away from it. But if there's something around the corner that you don't see, and therefore you cannot prepare for it, and it'll take you unawares. And when we trust in God, we already have all the protection that is needed. And even above that, because our God is stronger than anything Satan can throw against us. And that is why once we get to know God, once we get to fellowship with God in that secret place, we don't have to be afraid of that terror of the night. We don't have to be afraid of darkness anymore, because we know whatever they do throw at us, we know our God is right there setting up the defenses for it already. Nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. So no matter what times, no matter what it throws at us, well, either pestilence, which could be anything from a plague of sorts, like locusts, or it could be a disease like the Black Plague that would wipe out people right, left, and center. We don't have to be afraid of any of that stuff. Yes, we aren't to be stupid and walk right into it, but we are to know that whatever that Satan does in the world and the flesh throw at us, that God will be there to defend us against it. And 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand. When we are walking in our daily walks, people do fall around us, whether it be a spiritual fall, whether it be a physical fall, or emotional fall. People fall around us. It's crazy, as I'm working in the heart, how many people fall by either suicide or they fall into an emotional distress that they can't control. How many people just fall on either side as you're walking on, and even Christians. You look around sometimes and they stumble and fall. But the things that we need to know is that God is right there to pick us up and to set us right on the path that we need to go. And I know, like, when you're running, when we were playing tag in the woods as children, when you do fall, a lot of times when you hit your head, you get disoriented. You don't know which direction anything is. Especially if you go through a few tumbles, you're totally lost when you get back up. And that is where God steps in, puts us back on the path that we need to go, and gives us a little push. Just like in games where we would put a blindfold around our head and spin a few times around and then play tag like that, when there would be a parent or an older person there, if you were just about to walk off on the edge of something or a precipice, they would always catch you and push you back on the way that you need to go. And that is just how God is as a loving Father. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Now many of us look around us and we see people getting rich. And many of those people getting rich and wealthy and powerful are ones that are benefiting from evil. But we look around us and see that in the end, God does bring them their just rewards. With our own eyes, He shows us what is the end of sin. Because sin bringeth forth death. And death might not be only a physical death, but it's also a spiritual death and emotional death. Many people that are way up there that many others look up to, a lot of them just spiral into it seems like one day they're up there, one day they're giving speeches on how to get good, and the next day they're stumbling around in the alleyways, drunk and lost all their money. And the end of the wicked, we get to see that. God shows us the reward of the wicked. And because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High thy habitation, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. Now we do get through struggles, we do get to go through all, the rain falls on the righteous and the unrighteous, the sun shines on the evil and the pure, but God is the one that's bringing us through it. We don't have to face it alone like they do out there. We don't have to be looking which way to go now. We know the way to go. And that is how it is. For He gives His angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. Now I know if I didn't have guardian angels, I would have died many times, a long, long time ago. Ever since I was born, even before I was born, my mother tells me stories of how I could have died here, 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 and it just, the list goes on and on and on, and I believe I'll still be adding to the list here, as all of you will, because death and Satan and the flesh, they always seek our ruin, especially when we are walking with Christ. But that is why God gives His angels over us. His angels, and the thing is, we don't even need as many as He gives us. He gives above and beyond of what we need. And they shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against the stone. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and the adder. The young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample under feet. Now this shouldn't be taken in a literal sense. We aren't going to be walking on streets of lions anytime soon. But This is in a sense of young lions were a picture of strength. Adders would be pictures of deadly poison, because when they strike, they let go, and they just let whatever they struck just get paralyzed, and then they eat it. And dragons were also a symbol of overpowering strength. They could come and overpower a whole garrison of men, and they could come and overpower almost any beast of the field. And that is the picture. We can overpower anything that God sets us to overpower. And because he has set his love upon me. Now this is talking about the Christian or the Jew in that time. He has set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. We need to be loving God. A lot of people out there, they love cars, or they love some idol that they look up to. They love houses, or they love money. But our love is to be focused on God, because he is the only love that will actually fulfill us and that will keep us safe. And I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. And in the end here, on top of protecting us from all these sorts of evils, with long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. Now there's this one thing I saw in here. He shows us his salvation. And it doesn't say his salvation towards us. He leaves it at my salvation. And now, God's saving grace is just crazy when you try to understand it, how big, how vast, and how much it can cover. And I'll just bring you to a few examples. If you turn back to Genesis, we'll see some real life examples of God's salvation, how he showed it to people that followed him, that loved him, and that he was a refuge, he was their fortress. If we, Genesis chapter 41 and verse 31. Now Joseph, we all know the story of Joseph. When he was an early teenager, his brothers grew to hate him so much that they conspired to kill him. And only by God's grace, one of the brothers, something stirred in his heart, and he said, why don't we just sell him instead of killing him? And Joseph, as a young teenager, through all his, this is just when humans are going through that emotional change from turning from a child to an adult. This is just where it starts for a young man. Through all of that, he was sold by his brothers into slavery. Just think about all that turmoil that would have been going through him, all of that, probably anger at the beginning, as I know I would have had. But in it, he's looked to God first. And if we go to verse 31, and this is when Pharaoh is bringing him out of prison now, when God finally says, okay, it is time now that you move out. And in the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that family following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years, and let them gather all the food of these good years that come, and lay up the corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. So this was Joseph explaining to Pharaoh what he should do because of his dreams that he had dreamed the night before. And verse 37, and the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? Now look at this. In the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. Now, if I know people, they usually find it hard to agree on one thing. We could all see that this was the work of God. Because people, they tend to disagree even for the sake of disagreeing with somebody else. I know in my workplace, a lot of people disagree with other people just for the sake of disagreeing with them. They might agree in it, and you know that they both believe in the same thing, but they just disagree just to spite the other person. And that is just how humans are. They want to be up there and everybody below them. They do not want to share anything with anybody, whether it be glory, whether it be power, honor, so on. And here they all agreed on the one thing, verse 39. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Forasmuch as God hath shown thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried before him, Bow the knee. And he made him ruler over the land, over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. So in this proclamation that the Pharaoh said to Joseph and to all the servants that were around him, he pretty much made Joseph in command of Egypt. He relegated his own position to more of a ceremonial one, and he gave Joseph the rule of the land. Without Joseph, no man could lift up their hand or their foot. Without Joseph, it didn't say, if I allow it. It says, if Joseph would allow it. He was now just a ceremonial head. He was just like we see in England, the Queen is just a ceremonial head. She does have a say in things, but she usually does not have any power in any of the decisions that the nation makes. That power is now on the people and Parliament. And that is just how it was here. Joseph was the one in actual power in Egypt now. He had the power to do anything he would in that land. And that is just a crazy rise to power, from a jail cell to being a ruler of the land. It hasn't happened before, and it hasn't happened since. Many men have become rulers of the land from jail, like Nelson Mandela, but they did not have ultimate power. They were still governed by another group that was with them. But Joseph here had all the power in the nation. And it is amazing that God showed his salvation to Joseph. And now if we look down to chapter 47 and verse 5, here we see the salvation of God. Genesis 47, chapter 5. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, Thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee. The land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and brethren to dwell. In the land of Goshen let them dwell, and if thou knowest any man of activity among them, then make them rulers over my cattle. And Joseph brought in Jacob his father, and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, How old art thou? And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh, and went out from before Pharaoh. And Joseph placed his father and his brethren, and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren, and all his father's household with bread, according to their families. So here we see that salvation that God showed to Joseph was not only showed to him alone, but it was showed through him to his family. And not only to his family, we saw that now he was in control of Egypt. It was shown to him, through him, to the whole country of Egypt, his family, and all the nations surrounding them. Because it wasn't just Jacob and his sons that were coming there to buy the food when they ran out, because the famine was a big one that was spread around that whole area. It wasn't just the Egyptians he saved, nor his family, but all the nations around them. Because 7 years is hard to live without any trouble, especially if you don't have a store set by that you knew that famine was coming. Many people die in those situations, and here we see that God showed the salvation to Joseph, and not only to Joseph, but through Joseph, to millions of people around him. And if we go past to chapter 50, as we saw in Psalm 19, it also promised a long life and a good life. And verse 50, chapter 50 and verse 22. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house. And Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the 3rd generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up upon Joseph's knees. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I died, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So here we see that Joseph had a long life. He got to see Ephraim's children of the 3rd generation, so his great-great-great-grandchildren. He was ruler of all of Egypt, and we see that even when he died, he was given a royal funeral. Back in those days, embalming was only for kings or other people of very, very high estate. And many people were just embalmed, but this says he was embalmed and put into a coffin. Now, most people didn't get the coffin, they would just be embalmed and put into a tomb. But Joseph was of such high honor in that country that he was embalmed and put into a coffin. Now we see as we bring up those coffins out of Egypt, they're all delicately carved out of wood and then covered in gold and all manner of precious stones and other materials. We see that he was given a royal funeral. And we see that he lived a good life. He died of old age. A lot of people back then didn't get to reach ripe old age of 110, especially looking forward. Many people, they died maybe 60, maybe 70 of all the hard labor they had in their life. And Joseph was not so. He got to live to a ripe old age. He got to see many of his heritage, and he got to die and have a very good funeral. Now we look to Exodus chapter 2, just a few pages over, and we see a few generations forward, the same thing happened to Moses. If we go down to verse 10. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, because I drew him out of the water. So here we see that he was raised as the Pharaoh's daughter's son. He would be raised as a prince of Egypt. But because he remembered his heritage, he remembered the Lord, that he was the one true God. That would all change as we see in the following verses. And in verse 11, and it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren, and looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting an Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian, and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together, and he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killest the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh, and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. So here we see that Moses also was relegated from a very high position to a low position. As Joseph was the favorite son of a rich father down to a slave, Moses was a grandson of Pharaoh down to a runaway, an outlaw that had to run for his life from the country that he grew up in. And Moses here, he was still discovering what God would have for him. He now had stepped out by faith. He had protected his own family, his own kindred that he remembered. In all of his upbringing, he still remembered that he wasn't an Egyptian, but that he was an Hebrew. And he went after God, even though it might not have been God's will for him to slay that Egyptian. But we see that Moses' heart was with the Hebrews. His heart wasn't for all the love of things that the Egyptians had. They had either love of gods, love of chariot racing, love of many other things that they had as princes. He probably grew up a very luxurious life, especially in those days. But he forsook all that to stand up for his family and to stand up for his faith. And we go forwards a little bit to chapter 12 of Exodus. Chapter 12 and verse 31. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night, as is Pharaoh, and said, Rise up, and get you forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord as ye have said. Also take your flocks and your herds, as ye have said, and be gone, and bless me also. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people, that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, We be all dead men. So here we see that God, through Moses, was now showing salvation to Israel as he was taking them out of bondage, and all of Egypt was saying, Go. And if we looked in verses before, that the Egyptians had given them many gold and jewels just for them to go. They weren't just asking them to go, they were telling them to go and bribing them to even leave. And here we see that God shows his salvation in miraculous ways, that once one person follows God, he shows his salvation through him. And he can reach multiple and multitudes of other people through that one person that follows and obeys God. And if we go forward to Deuteronomy, chapter 34. Deuteronomy chapter 34, and we'll be starting in verse 5. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, over against Beth Peor. But no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day. And Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was not dim, nor his natural force abated. So here we see that Moses also lived a good life, so much so that when he did die at 120, his eye was not dim. He didn't need glasses, even though they probably didn't have them yet back then. But he didn't need them, and his natural force abated. All that natural strength that a man has from his youth, you start losing it once you get older. Things start to break, things start not to work as they should. As much as we do not like to think about that, but God, after the sin, in his mercy, made our bodies to decay over time, because of a life forever in sin would just be torture. And God knew that he had to end our lives at some point so that we could come with him and live that victorious life in him. We didn't have to live in sin. In his foresight, he closed off the garden with the tree of life so that men wouldn't have to live their whole life in sin and forever, for an eternity. Could you imagine how that would be? You would kill somebody and they would probably come back to life because there was no death, they would live forever. How disgusting would that be? There wouldn't be the flood, so people would just be getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and nobody would be dying. It would just be chaos. And God, in his mercy, saw that men shouldn't go through that, so he closed off the garden. But here we see that Moses was not affected as many other people are. His natural force was still with him. He still hiked up the mountains to look out to commune with God. His death place was a large mountain. And I know I like climbing mountains, and even as a young man I get tired, especially once you come close to the top. Some of them are pretty steep, and they might not seem very tall from afar, or even from below. But once you get up to what you thought was the peak, there's another one. And you get up to the next one, and there's another one. And the natural peak, or the actual peak, is usually far back, and you have to get up over 3 or 4 steps sometimes to get to the actual peak. And Moses here, his natural force was still with him. He was blessed in that perspective, that he could still walk and lead the children of Israel. He could still go up the mountains to commune with God, and he still had all that strength that men have from their youth, and they start to lose it, but he didn't. So we see that both of these men lived a good life, lived a long life, and through them, because they followed God, they obeyed God, even in their hardships, God showed through them his salvation. Not just to them, but to everybody around them. And that is just how God wants to use us. When we go through those struggles, when we go through those temptations, God is preparing us for something. We don't need to stumble and fall and say, sorry God, I can't do this anymore. We need to stand back up, let God put us right on that direction that we need to go. And we need to keep walking forward, because who knows, you might be the one that will bring salvation to many, either through your preachings or your works. Even as a lady, we see in the scripture that men would preach and hundreds or thousands would be saved sometimes. But even ladies as Tabitha, when she died, the whole town mourned her. And it wasn't a small town, it was a large trading town in the port of the Mediterranean. The whole town mourned for her because she had an outreach for God that she served in that perspective. She served, she reached people, and doubtless many came to God because of her. And that is just how we are to be. We are to be following God. We are to be having Him as our refuge, not many other things that people fall back upon, either buying the next new thing or falling into drugs or alcohol to forget about it. But we need to strive forward to God so that He can show His salvation to us and then through us.